Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the first virtual Energy Efficiency Finance Forum. As many of you know, we've been doing this for a number of years. Unfortunately, this year we have to do it virtually. But we look forward to meeting with all of you face-to-face next May when we are again live in White Plains, New York. I'm Steve Nadell, and I'm the Executive Director of ACEEE. I wanted to welcome you, but I will also be moderating today's Keynote and Plenary panel. To start, a few housekeeping announcements. Your screen can be customized using the widgets across the bottom of your screen, just to get it to work just right for you. All of the attendees are in listen-only mode, but please submit questions through the Q&A box at any time. That's the widget at the bottom. And we will read out the questions and answer them, picking those questions first for which we think will have the broadest interest. So if we don't get to your question, sorry, but we'll do our best to get as many as we can. You can use the chat feature, again, at the bottom to share information, ideas with others in real time. And I wanted to thank all of you for attending, but also thanking our various sponsors for help making this Finance Forum possible, particularly our host sponsor, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, but also our many other sponsors, such as our gold sponsors, Eversource, United Illuminating, and National Grid, and our silver sponsor, Southern California Gas. There are also a number of bronze sponsors. I won't read them all, but please check out the list of sponsors and thank them as you work with them in the coming days and weeks ahead. With that, I wanted to give a little bit of a opening presentation to help frame this, kick off this conference. And in particular, I think some useful framing is provided by a report that ACEEE published last year. We looked at 5 major types of energy efficiency financing programs, and together find that they provide nearly $7 billion in lending annually. We compared this to an earlier study from 2014, and the amount of energy efficiency financing is up 40%. And you can see here in this graph, things like CPACE and RPACE in particular are up quite a bit, as is energy saving performance contracts, which are on a scale to themselves. But all of these together, as well as a few other things that we'll be talking about over the coming 2 days, help contribute to the energy efficiency finance. To provide a little bit more information, this is the Coalition for Green Capital's review of what is happening with green banks. As you can see, that has been steadily increasing with some ups and downs, but generally on an upswing. Likewise, this is from Pace Nation, and looks at financing via PACE financing, down a little bit in 2020. 2020 obviously was a very unusual year, but I'm hearing reports that things are starting to pick up again, which is great. And I'd note even 2020 was dramatically more than 2018, so it was just a little blip. With that, I am happy to introduce Alfred Griffin, who's one of the co-chairs of this conference and has worked with us closely to help pull together the program. Alfred was, until relatively recently, the head of the New York State Green Bank, but now he is with Generate Capital. And so with that, let me turn it over to Alfred.
Thank you, Steve, and thanks to everyone in attendance. Good afternoon or good morning, wherever you may be, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here, and have had the opportunity to be involved with this conference for probably close to a dozen years now, and I'll look forward to next year when hopefully we're back in person. As co-chair, I have the opportunity of introducing our keynote, but Steve and team did want me to speak briefly about my new role, and then also to talk about what excites me most in terms of a new product development and energy efficiency. So Steve alluded to, I was at the New York Green Bank since its founding over 7 years ago, and it was an absolutely wonderful opportunity. I did move on in March to Generate Capital to help lead a dedicated credit business that will be looking to provide financing solutions to technology and companies and project developers at the forefront of the infrastructure revolution. And this is an expansion of Generate's franchise, where its core business of financing and building and owning and operating sustainable infrastructure has established Generate as the only one-stop shop for sustainable infrastructure pioneers. So whether you're looking for a partner to own assets that you're developing, be an equity investor alongside you, or you're looking to own but looking for financing via our credit business, we want to be the place to go for all of those solutions. In terms of what I'm most excited about, there's so many good products out there, and we all know what they are, and we've been talking about them for so long, and we've all been a bit frustrated that there's not even more deployment than there has been. And as Steve showed in the graphs, we've seen a substantial improvement in terms of clean energy opportunities and energy efficiency financing. But I think what really excites me the most are things like Local Law 97 in New York State, CLCPA in the state of New York, which I'm sure Kim Earl of the Green Bank will speak to in a bit, and other state policies that are really forcing building owners to pay attention. And for lack of a better word, a little bit of a stick to say, look, you need to pay attention. You need to meet certain requirements. If not, there will be certain potential penalties, forcing building owners to actually implement what we've known are cost-saving measures, but just haven't gotten the attention. And I think a great example of the direct impact is a letter that we got for our building, our apartment building, just in the last few days, going through all the things that that will be in front of the board over the next couple of months, but also noting that there's going to have to be work on, as they called it, the antiquated oil-based system that needs to be replaced, and we now have a timeline in which we have to replace it via Local Law 97. So I'm excited that these sorts of regulations and policy initiatives will stimulate even greater activity than what we've seen. So that's what I'm excited about. So let me turn to our keynote speaker, whom I've had the pleasure to know over the last dozen years or so. Jigar Shah really needs no introduction. When I joined Generate a couple of months ago and was talking to our communications team, and they were asking about LinkedIn and how many followers I had. I was sort of proud of myself that I had 4,000 or 5,000 followers. Being in a public service role like the New York Green Bank, I think it puts you in a position that a number of folks reach out to follow. So I was a bit proud of that. Thought I had done well in that regard, but the communications director informed me that Generate had 800,000 followers. So some big shoes to fill there, and that was before the role of the DOE. So it's going to be 8 million followers by the time Jigar is done there. Of course, we all know of the Energy Gang, and I still enjoy the Energy Gang, but I sure miss Jigar being on those podcasts on a weekly basis and being able to hear Jigar's thoughts. But a few of his accomplishments, just to remind everyone, Jigar was the founder of SunEdison, which basically invented pay-as-you-go solar as a service, which has been utilized across the MUSH markets, the corporate markets, and the residential markets in enormous volumes since Jigar got it started with SunEdison. Jigar was the founding CEO of Carbon War Room, and the co-founder and president of Generate Capital, where I am now, where infrastructure as a service is the focus, and where he helped build the now well-established Generate model of infrastructure as a service and a one-stop shop for financing needs for partners in perpetuity. I have never been in a meeting with Jigger where I didn't leave with, I haven't thought about that, and that's a really interesting idea. Where Jigger asks a question, have you thought about doing it this way? And usually the answer is like, no, but that's a really good idea. I will think about doing it that way. And I'll certainly, miss having Jigger at Generate to probe me to think beyond how I'm thinking. But I can't be more delighted to have Jigger leading as a leader in the U.S. Government Department of Energy with the loan program, thinking about newer ways of doing things, challenging the status quo, and inspiring all of us to do better. And on the inspiration piece, I had a conversation where Jigger's name came up just last week, where at Generate, there's an interesting little program that every week pops up, and suggests that you have a donut with someone, which is really just since we're all virtual, a virtual call, and it just randomly picks people that you may not have met before. So I had a donut with someone on the accounting team who's relatively junior, not long out of college. She grew up in India. She now lives in San Francisco. I asked her how she wound up getting interested in clean energy. She's an accountant. She said, well, Jigger Shaw. She came across years ago one of the podcasts. From that, read Jigger's book, Creating Climate Wealth, Unlocking the Impact Economy, and that Jigger inspired her to dedicate her life to clean energy. And then, I said, well, how did you wind up at Generate Capital? And it was like, well, that's where Jigger was. And she kept searching for job postings until she found a job that she could apply to and step into. So I think that pretty much says it all. When you can inspire people to make a career out of a field. And this individual said that she had several friends that, based upon Jigger's inspiration, have chosen clean energy as as where they would spend their lifetime of work. Jigger, we look forward to you providing that kind of inspiration at a national and global level, and to all the great things you're going to do at the LPO. And with that, I will turn it over to Jigger to tell us how he thinks of success at the LPO and any new ideas and ways of thinking he has regarding energy efficiency. Thank you.
Thanks, Alfred. It's great to be here. I'm a huge fan of what Alfred has built over the New York Green Bank, and now what he's building over at Generate Capital. The goal of the Loan Programs Office is pretty simple, which is basically to figure out how we take all the innovations that the Department of Energy and many others have created throughout our great country, and have people bring them to scale here with American workers, creating American jobs. And, for far too long, I think we've had a lot of our best innovations be piloted here through demonstration projects and other R&D efforts, but they've been scaled up elsewhere. And I think the goal is to really make sure that happens here. And so one of the things that we're doing on the energy efficiency front today is really focused on finding ways to really scale up distributed energy resources, connected buildings, demand response and load control. Many of the technologies of which have been invented here, the software has been invented here, but the marketplace is not here. And getting it to scale here is one of our top priorities.
Okay, thanks, Jigger. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to ask you some questions, have a little discussion, and then we'll throw it open to the audience. First, what do you see success meaning for the loan program office?
Well, in strictly dollars and cents terms, we've been carrying forward about $40+ billion of authority for far too long. And so getting a lot of that money out the door is success for me now, just because I think that the Congress loves what we do and likes the program, but doesn't want to give us more money until we get this money out the door. And so I think proving to them that we're open for business and that we are meeting the needs of American innovators, I think is a top priority.
Okay, now very good. Now, you mentioned energy efficiency as one of the examples. What do you see as some of the opportunities for the loan program office in the energy efficiency space?
Well, I think it's important to note that I would say that with some hesitation, just in case people correct me, but we've never done an energy efficiency loan in the entire history of the DOE Loan Programs Office. So I'd like to correct that. That'd be good. The program that we're focused on right now is really about the architecture that has been put in place by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission around connected buildings and FERC Order 2222, right? And allowing appliances and buildings and batteries and other loads to really participate equally within wholesale power markets and other markets. And I think when you look at where we are today, that is, one, not happening at scale, but two, it's certainly not being done with justice in mind. And I think that the Loan Programs Office has a number of initiatives that it's put in place to be able to solve that problem. So we're working with residential solar installers who, are today financing $1 billion a month in deployments, to municipalities and energy authorities, which have been set up around the country to help consumers avoid the usurious sort of 30% interest rates that they're charged for emergency appliance purchases. And then I think three, there's a lot of electric utility companies who have seen this as a non-wires alternative approach to distribution system upgrades, right? And so for them, deploying connected devices and deploying these technologies writ large are ways in which to keep electricity bills low through reduced distribution system investment.
Okay, so you mentioned demand response, such as with appliances, solar systems. What do you see as some of the other potentially promising demand side applications through your program?
Well, I mean, certainly you have Local Law 97 in New York, where there's a huge mandate, really, to do things that reduce greenhouse gas emissions, as you know better than most. I mean, Local Law 97 is not an energy efficiency mandate. It really is a greenhouse gas emission mandate. And so there are people who are looking at carbon sequestration and storage for the emissions coming out of boilers. There are people looking at, making radiators more efficient. There are folks looking at advanced metering technologies. There are people looking at all sorts of things, right? And I think we are happy to play a role in helping many of the smaller C&I, commercial industrial building owners get access to the financing that they need to really deploy technologies that I think meet this criteria around connected things, but also meet the criteria of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And so I think we're seeing a lot of interest from entrepreneurial areas there. And then certainly there are a lot of other innovations in the energy efficiency space. So for instance, I think there are many universities in the Northeast who've committed themselves to getting off of natural gas. And they're looking at ground source heat pumps and things like that. And they're not well served by the ESCO markets because the ESCOs in general are not eagerly sitting there to provide warranties on their work in the geothermal heat space. And so they're looking to us to provide that loan guarantee, and we're happy to provide it because we believe that technology is well researched within our 10,000 engineers and scientists working here at the Department of Energy and the national labs. And so we think we can get comfortable with those deployments. And so the breadth of what we can do is quite broad. But we do need to get these projects warehoused so that they can be, $100 million in size or more.
Okay. Now, thank you. Now, you mentioned Local Law 97, just briefly for those who do not know it, that's New York City's building performance standards. Likewise, these are mandatory requirements to upgrade buildings over time. Washington, D.C., Washington State, St. Louis also have such programs, just to fill in a bit. And Jigar, could you talk a little bit more about how the loan program office works? For example, you provide loan guarantees. You don't directly provide the loan funds. Can you fill people in a little bit more about exactly how this all works?
Oh, sure. Yeah. And thanks for helping me out there, Steve. Sometimes we talk a little bit in riddles over here. The Loan Guarantee Program was established in 2005 during the Energy Policy Act there, and then enhanced in 2007, and then again enhanced in 2009 with the ERA stimulus money from the Obama administration. And so that's where a lot of our funding comes from. It's split up into three programs: Title 17, which is mostly project finance, and then Advanced Technology Vehicle Manufacturing Program, which is mostly EVs and batteries and critical minerals. And then the third is a Tribal Energy Program. Under Title 17 and ATVM, we have the ability to provide people with cash directly to their projects. So we don't have to go through a bank. We can work through the U.S. Treasury Department and provide money from the Federal Financial Bank directly. Some people prefer working with their local bank, and in that case, we can provide up to an 80% credit guarantee instead. And that's because, the local bank can be faster depending on what kind of relationship you have with your local bank. So we can do all of those things. And under the Tribal Energy Loan Program, we can only do a credit guarantee, so we cannot provide cash directly under that program.
Okay. Now, thank you. But as you said, you need relatively large projects. It's not the place to go borrow $3,000 or get a guarantee for a heat pump. You're looking for aggregators who can create a substantial demand.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, well, the American people need large check sizes, right? As you know, if we're going to meet the decarbonization goals of the president by 2035 and for the electricity grid in 2050 for the entire economy, we're going to have to put a lot of money to work.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a certain amount of, unfortunately, of paperwork, approval, et cetera. And it's much better to have it for many projects than just a small number.
Yeah.
So you have mentioned a number of different ideas, whether it's with the plazas, with solar, with commercial buildings. Obviously, you have efficiency as well as many other areas. What are the things that you find most exciting now that you go, wow, in the morning, I want to make this happen?
Well, certainly, I'm excited about all of our projects, right? I'm excited about American jobs and American infrastructure. I think that obviously the virtual power plants and, figuring out how to electrify everything and figuring out how to help people make better decisions in terms of not, being subject to 30% interest rates, makes me most excited, right? Figuring out how to really help those of us who have less than $800 in the checking account and, who can't easily, pay for a new refrigerator or air conditioner or water heater, really, I think gets me up in the morning every day. And I think it gets a lot of people up in the morning every day. And so I think we've had tremendous interest from state governments, municipal governments, municipal utilities, investor-owned utilities, and, the residential solar community. And so, that has been very exciting.
Okay. So, Jigar, today we have a diverse group of many people involved in energy efficiency programs, energy efficiency finance. what are some of the things you would like them to do as they think about how best to help you be successful and leverage your program?
Well, it's really about looking at your sphere of influence, right? I was talking to a nonprofit leader in Massachusetts who came to me, who's been aggregating up nonprofit load in deregulated markets. So they basically were sort of a negotiator on behalf of all of those loads for cheaper electricity rates and greener power. And she said, well, $100 million is too large for us. There's no way we can do something like that. I've got a couple of $10 million projects. And I said, well, why don't you go check? Here's the particulars of our program. And she came back with, $250 million for the projects. And so, I think in general, the biggest challenge I see is that I think we're not thinking big enough. I think even when you go through your own sphere of influence, I think almost everyone who has an established trust relationship with a set of customers can get to $100 million or more of deployments in the near term. I mean, we're living on borrowed time, as you know. I mean, many of our assets should have been replaced 10, 15 years ago, and people have them, working with duct tape and baling wire. And we have very efficient replacements for them. And today, the technology is such that you can actually electrify them completely and skip the fossil fuel step altogether on much of it. And you can integrate it into broader systems. And so I think in general, there's a lot of folks who have been thinking too small. I'll give you another example. I was talking to a rural electric co-op who said, well, Jigger, I only have 15,000 customers. And, after we did the math, turns out they could do $140 million for the projects for those 15,000 customers, right? And so I think that, I just think that in general, people need to think bigger, and then feel free to call our office. I mean, we're staffed to be able to, take these questions and to talk it through with you.
Right. Now, one of the nice things about your program is there's many different potential types of customers you could have, whether it's a co-op, it's a state or city government, private industry, et cetera. Many different potential users who can really leverage it for all sorts of projects. And you've given a number of examples, so appreciate that. Before I turn over to the Q&A from the audience, are there any other key points you'd like all of the participants here to understand about your program and how best they can leverage it?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I would say is that we really are about innovation. And innovation is not breakthroughs in science. Innovation is a new approach to an old problem, right? So whether it's business model innovation or software innovation or innovation in the way in which we interact with the system, we define innovation in very broad terms. I'd say the other thing is that we're here to help people build a bridge to bankability. So there are some technologies that have already built that bridge. So whether it's solar or wind or lithium-ion batteries for storage or others, I mean, some folks are actually capable of getting very low cost, very affordable debt from the marketplace already. And those are the folks we're not really, serving, because we're not looking to compete with the commercial markets. We're really looking to provide liquidity solutions to companies who deserve them, or, entities that deserve them, but, can't get a second phone call with their local bank or commercial debt provider on their way to building the level of data to be able to fix that problem going forward.
Okay, so let's turn to audience questions. First one, which picks up on this, from Ivan Rappin-Smith at Watsco. The question is, how does one practically engage with the loan program offered to develop concrete projects?
Yeah, I mean, I think the development of concrete projects has to be done by the developer, right? There's a wonderful woman in our office, Gretchen Kittle, and she coordinates with over 10 outreach officers we have in the office. And so, when you send us an email, lpo@hq.doe.gov, someone picks it up, calls you back, and and talks to you about your project, and then we'll say, here's why it's a good idea, and here's probably why it might be slightly problematic, and here's some of the tips that you might have, and then you might say, well, that's great, and I'll come back to you in 2 months after I've figured things out, and and do another pre-consultation then, right? And so the goal is for people as many pre-consultations as they need within reason to be able to help people really think through how our program works and how their expertise can benefit from our program.
Okay, very good, thanks. But yes, operators are standing by, ready for your calls, or ready for your emails at least. Right, next question is from Andrew Isaacs at Allegheny Science. And he asks, have you thought about getting funding out through state energy offices or state housing finance agencies to reach low and moderate income populations, such as the augment energy efficiency incentives for multifamily building, for high performing equipment, for renewables, all as part of the administration's efforts to retrofit 2 million homes?
Yeah, so we've already done that, right? That's what the clean water funds are in every single state. Every single state has a clean water fund, which is a AAA rating, and lots of excess cash. And the EPA has already allowed every clean water fund in every state to provide such services. So I think that many states just haven't thought about how they politically can do that. But that has already been thought of. And then separately, you've got the CEDA, which is the Clean Energy Development Authority that's going through the Congress now for $100 billion, and we'll see what happens to it as it goes through the budget process. But that is the sort of version of that as well. And the Loan Program Office is doing that directly with several state energy offices who I think are able to use their clean water funds as credit enhancement.
Right. So basically you need an entity with a credit payment history, whether it's a clean water fund, NYSERDA might be able to do it directly, but you need an agency with a proven credit history, if I understand. Is that correct, or please correct me?
Yeah, and all 50 states already have it. So anyone who's really committed to solving the problem and has the political support to solve it, we can solve it within 4 months for you.
Okay, sounds good. They're here to help you. Next question is from Susan Mills at KFA. I don't know exactly how to pronounce that abbreviation, but she asked, why can the program only do credit guarantee for the tribal energy program?
That's the way it was set up by Congress. It was actually set up that way in 2005 in the Energy Policy Act. It just wasn't funded until 2017. And so, we've asked the Congress to change that so that we can do direct financing as well, but that's where it is today.
Okay. And then Ivan asked, he missed the email. Could you repeat the email to email the office?
LPO, Loan Programs Office, so LPO at hq.doe.gov. Okay.
Question from Stephanie Murphy, at Neighborhood Finance. To follow up on the question about states, how about programs that partner with CDFIs?
Yeah. We can work with CDFIs. CDFIs are qualified for loan guarantees from us, and we're certainly talking to several. Happy to work with anyone who has financial sophistication, experience, and a balance sheet.
Okay, very good. Let's see, and just to clarify. The agency I couldn't quite pronounce. It's the California Alternative Energy and Advanced Transportation Financing Authority. It's a mouthful. It doesn't quite flow off the tongue.
I think it sits in the Treasurer's office, doesn't it? But doesn't it sit in the Treasurer's office? I think it sits in the Treasurer's office.
Okay, you know it better than I do. Not a surprise.
We're talking to the state of California at 8 different levels, and so they know exactly how our program works and how it doesn't work, and so I mean, we were talking to the California Energy Commission, the Treasurer's Office, the California ISO, the CPUC. We're talking to every arm of the state of California on this.
Okay. Here's a question from Melissa Malkin Weber with the Self-Help Credit Union. Wanted to know a little bit about the state water programs that potentially could be used in, I'll say, most states. Could you say a little bit more about it for those who are not familiar?
Yeah, so they were set up during the Clean Water Act, and every year the federal government allocates money to the states, and it's the state's money. Once it gets block granted from the federal government to the states, it gets block granted there. And clean water funds are generally run by people who are wastewater treatment engineers to help with wastewater treatment around the state. But there's been tons of rulings by EPA, who manages it, that says that anytime you have a water nexus, which energy does, that those monies can be used for that purpose. And at the very least, their credit rating can be used to guarantee loans from people like us to be able to use for energy purposes.
Okay. Now, Francis Lynch asks an easy one. What is the CDFI? It's a Community Development Finance Institution, of which there are several hundred across the country. But Jigger, do you want to add anything there?
Well, I think that CDFIs are like any other financial institutions. They are just more focused on helping people who have been left behind. But like any other debt institution, they look for collateral, and they look for guarantees, and they look for ability to repay and all sorts of things. So they're not a panacea. They still have to live by the laws of ability to repay.
Right, but they have a bit more of a social purpose than the average financial institution.
That's right.
Yeah. So David Hodgins from this Sutento group asks, are QECBs or other similar federally subsidized green bond programs, might they have a role to play in what you are doing? And if you could explain what QECBs are for those who don't know.
Well, QECBs are qualified energy conservation bonds. And I mean, I don't know the answer to the question. I guess what I would say is that we have had, clean energy bonds. We've had all sorts of bonds, and sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, right? I mean, the way that most of these things work is they end up being 0% interest because the federal government pays the interest through a series of tax credits that come with the bonds. But in general, I don't think any of these are really permanent solutions to the problem, right? I mean, we need about $1 trillion a year to electrify everything and to decarbonize our economy. And you're not going to get $1 trillion a year of QECBs. So my sense is you're going to have to figure out how to unlock the private sector. And that's what the Loan Programs Office is particularly expert at. So that's what I would focus on.
Right. And I would also note that's what your career, if I could summarize it, how do you unlock large-scale finance and to the level of scale that we need to really transform our energy use, our emissions, and other issues. We have a question, another one from Francis Lynch, which is about hydrogen. Is the Loan Program Office doing anything in this area? And, how do you see that fitting in?
Sure, yeah. I mean, we have got several applications in the Loan Programs Office for green hydrogen, and so we're processing them now. I think it's important to note that the Loan Programs Office doesn't make national policy. So, we believe that the technology to make green hydrogen is mature enough to be able to take on senior debt. And we believe these projects are well-structured projects such that they can successfully get money from us. But we're not, like through our loan guarantees, we're not suggesting that, green hydrogen is better than blue hydrogen, or is better than, electrify everything, or is better than whatever else. I mean, I think that's for other policymakers to decide.
Okay. Here's somebody with a detailed question about how your work might apply to them. I'm going to ask it, and you can generalize without, to other types of entities that may be similar. But this is from Tom Myers from Slipstream, and he's with Slipstream Energy Financial Services. And he notes, we are a nonprofit financial service provider in the energy regulated space. We are an originator of various funds and programs nationally, and often need additional funds or risk mitigation. Do you see any potential for the Loan Program Office to assist their efforts and mission, or other entities like them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is what we do. And so if they have a bank, for instance, like maybe they're already working with Amalgamated Bank, and Amalgamated Bank says, this is great, we're happy to do $10 million a month with you. But, at some point their credit officer says, we've got too much exposure to Slipstream. Well, we can provide an 80% credit guarantee to Amalgamated Bank, which now reduces the overall risk exposure from Amalgamated, so they can do more banking with Slipstream. Right, so we do lots of things that look like that to be able to unlock more volume from existing players.
Okay. We got a question about your contact email. I'm assuming, again, Loan Program Office at DOE.gov?
That's right. It's lpo@hq.doe.gov.
Okay, thanks. But you can go through that address, and where he has a whole staff, and where they need Jigger in particular, it'll get up to him. Okay, one final question. I'm going to, we just had another one pop up. Ben Samways, do energy efficiency finance aggregation programs stand out to you? Say the top three.
Oh, no, none of them stand out to me. I mean, because they're not even close to being large, right? I mean, when you think about, where the residential solar marketplace is, which is at $1 billion a year, or $1 billion a month, sorry. I mean, that's the kind of scale you need. I think, probably one of the most successful energy efficiency programs today is TPG's Green Sky program, which is, charging very high interest rates for on-the-spot financing for residential HVAC and Anderson windows.
Thanks. Message here, think much larger scale than we've ever thought before. Question from David Hodgkins. Any further guidance for folks trying to design new financing programs to help them align with your Title 17 program?
Yeah, I just think it's important for people to recognize that we're not a subsidy program. We're a liquidity program. So if you have a great idea and consumers really will pay the loans back, but you can't get people to believe you, well, then we will believe you. To show us the data, show us how people pay you back, and we believe you. And that's how this works. And then we'll provide a guarantee, and we'll get a bank to believe you. And then you'll be off to the races. But the goal here is not to provide a subsidy from our office. It's to provide you access to credit that other people are not willing to give you access to, and to really move things forward that way. And then at some point, you won't need us anymore, and the banks will believe you without us.
Okay, very good. Now, a number of people keep asking about email, the Loan Program Office. Look at your chat. Our staff have added it there. So we don't have to keep, pretending we're a phone-a-thon and repeating it constantly. Look at your chat. Final question. Our next plenary is all about how we can better serve low, moderate income communities and families. Can you say a little bit more about what are some potential things that your program can do to help these critical communities and these critical communities?
Yeah, so I think that when you think about the solutions that we need to these communities, I think we need to separate the measures that we're doing into different buckets, right? So the reason we're focused on appliances is because appliances are must-purchase items, right? So people in low moderate income communities who have an air conditioner that goes out really do need that air conditioner to get fixed or replaced. They don't generally want to live without the air conditioning or water heating or a working refrigerator. I think when you talk about building envelope weatherization, very important work. It's not generally a requirement of the resident. And so what ends up happening is that they're not really willing to do that with their own money in the same way that they are willing to sign up to a 30% interest loan, for instance, for required appliances, which we're trying to, do better than. And so in that case, you're using weatherization assistance programs or LIHEAP money or other types of money that comes from the utility to be able to provide, important required services to help people improve their building stock so they can live through a polar vortex, which happens with increasing frequency. And then we've got the electric vehicle transportation side of things, which we are able to finance under the Loan Programs Office. And so I think it's important to separate the issues into two different buckets. One being things that LMI communities are prepared to pay for and actually, in fact, already are getting nickel and dimed over. And things that generally are things that are more of a matter of public policy, which then have to get funded as a matter of public policy.
Okay, no, that's a good construct, and we'll probably pick up on that as we move into the next session. So, Jigar, thank you very much. We appreciate you joining us. And for people who have questions, Loan Program Office and his staff can help answer you, and hopefully a year from now, when we next meet, we can talk about all the many energy efficiency projects that your office has helped make possible. So thank you very much, Jigar.
We look forward to it, and we look forward to your partnership. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Okay, certainly. Okay, with that, we're going to move on to our plenary panel on environmental justice and equitable clean energy investment. We have two other panelists to join us. First is Kim Earl from the New York Green Bank, and second is Jahi Wise with the White House Office of Domestic Climate Policy. So I'm going to introduce first Kim, let her to say a couple of remarks, then Jahi, ask him to say a few remarks, and then we'll pick it up with some discussion questions, followed by Q&A with the audience. So with that, Kim is the Managing Director of New York Green Bank and oversees strategy, impact, and investor relations. She is an accredited sustainability professional and creative problem solver with extensive experience and a bias toward using performance measurement and metrics to drive change. Prior to joining the New York Green Bank, she worked as an independent strategy consultant, providing thought leadership to senior executives in business strategy and organizational change. With that, Kim, please turn on your camera, and we look forward to your opening remarks.
Greetings, and thank you so much for the nice introduction. So many thanks to ACEEE for inviting me to participate in today's plenary panel, really on a topic that has become near and dear to me. So I was asked to include in my opening remarks just what I've been up to. And Alfred mentioned the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, or the CLCPA, here in New York State in his remarks. Well, as the head of New York Green Bank's strategy, impact, and investor relations functions, I've spent basically the better part of the last year working on our strategy to deploy considerably more capital into projects that benefit historically marginalized communities. And that's really a centerpiece of the CLCPA. More recently, I've been working on expanding New York Green Bank's impact function to incorporate broader environment, social, and governance practices for New York Green Bank. So NYSERDA's recent strategic outlook cited the important themes of climate change, equity and inclusivity, jobs and economic opportunity, public health, and climate resilient communities as central to NYSERDA's mission and vision going forward. And in response to NYSERDA's enhanced mission statement, New York Green Bank is really pursuing the opportunity to address the themes of equity and resiliency through an enhanced set of ESG practices, both organizationally and related to our portfolio of investments. So introducing these practices will not only help New York Green Bank maintain its position as a leading green bank, but it really also makes sense given the increasing confluence of climate change and social justice. So those are the things I've been up to, disadvantaged communities investment and expanding our ESG practices.
Okay, very good. And we look forward to further discussion with you in just a few minutes. Next, I wanted to have Jahi Wise give some opening remarks. He is a senior advisor for climate policy and finance in the White House Office of Domestic Climate Policy, where he focuses on domestic climate finance, clean energy deployment, economic development, and equitable investment. Prior to joining the Office of Climate Policy, he served as policy director for the Coalition for Green Capital, where he helped lead development of policy and strategy to establish a national clean energy accelerator. With that, Jahi, please provide a few opening remarks.
Thanks, Stephen. It's good to be here. Appreciate the invitation to participate in this timely conversation, and great to be here with Kim from the amazing New York Green Bank. As was already noted, I'm a senior advisor in the White House Office of Domestic Climate Policy, which is led by the National Climate Advisor, Gina McCarthy. And this office is really designed to be a coordinator for the whole of government response to the climate crisis and the opportunities that crisis presents. We just reached a 100-day mark of the administration a few weeks ago, and can say with a pretty high degree of confidence that we've spent almost every day working hard to deliver on the president's pledge that the crisis of climate, but also the opportunities that it presents, will be seized to create good-paying jobs and a better and more fair economy for the entire country. There's a number of different interesting things I wanted to highlight that we've done that I think are relevant for this conversation. One, setting a goal that we will have a carbon pollution-free power sector by 2035 and be on an irreversible path to a net zero economy by 2050. We launched the Justice 40 initiative, which mandates that 40% of the benefits of climate-related investments flow to disadvantaged communities, a huge effort to kind of level the playing field around climate and clean energy investment. And then reboot of efficiency standards programs to make sure that American families are buying the most efficient and high-quality appliances and saving money. So there's a lot that's been done, and I think looking forward, the president is pretty aware and keen on the opportunity that building decarbonization and building efficiency presents. I think that's why you see in the American Jobs Plan really heavy emphasis on investments in building efficiency and decarbonization. $40 billion in investment for decarbonizing and making public housing more efficient, $27 billion to invest in a clean energy and sustainability accelerator, and updates to building efficiency tax credits, grant programs for those things. There's a huge push to invest heavily in making our buildings more efficient, and these investments will have direct benefits to downstream consumers and building owners and residents that live in these buildings and work in these buildings, but also to our manufacturing sector, so that we can bring more of the good-paying jobs, building advanced heat pumps and financing them to our shores. So I just wanted to give a little bit of a framing of the things that we've been thinking about and working on since we started the administration, and really look forward to the discussion. I think it's a really timely panel. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And Jahi, you can stay on because I'm going to ask you a question. What are some examples of things that the administration is thinking about boosting investment and making homes in disadvantaged communities healthier and more energy efficient? In particular, what do you see as the role of EE finance in those efforts?
Yeah, I mean, there's deep understanding in the administration of the connection between health and climate. Issues of indoor air quality, especially in disadvantaged communities, are a big priority for this administration. And so we know the more that we can move people away from, emitting, carbon and pollution into their homes and into the buildings where they work, the better their health. And so there's a heavy investment in just making sure that we have the dollars that are necessary to weatherize homes, improve public housing. But I think, stepping aside from those kind of grant or block grant programs for a second, there is a really strong role for EE finance that we know there's lots of projects, and Jigger speaks well about this. There's lots of projects that are financeable, where the savings generated by a project could pay for the upfront capital costs. We just need the mechanisms to facilitate that. And so that's why you saw, the president put a really big investment behind the idea of a clean energy accelerator, which, as folks on this call are familiar with, is a piece of legislation that's been in the House and the Senate for years, which is the idea of creating a national green bank that would help to facilitate, clean energy and energy efficiency transactions at the state and local level through a variety of institutions like the New York Green Bank and others that have been doing this work and delivering on this promise. So there's, we're hoping to put, and AJP hopes to put a lot of resources behind making sure that energy efficiency finance happens at scale across the country.
Okay, no, much appreciated. And we look forward to hopefully many aspects of that plan being adopted. Kim, I'm going to turn to you. You noted that the New York State Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act requires that 40% of the benefits of clean energy investment will be to historically disadvantaged communities. Can you speak broadly about the New York Green Bank's role to help ensure that this goal is met?
Sure. Broadly speaking, as a clean energy investment vehicle, our role is to support New York State's energy policy and, frankly, pretty ambitious climate goals, including meeting the CLCPA's targets related to providing clean energy benefits to disadvantaged communities. So the CLCPA is bigger than just the 40% target for disadvantaged communities, but because we support state policy, we also are responsible for contributing to the climate equity aspect of CLCPA. And we do this by providing gap-filling financing products that also help transform financing markets for solutions that deliver clean energy outcomes to historically disadvantaged communities across New York State. So we're stewards of $1 billion of New York State ratepayer capital, which we deploy and continuously recycle into projects across the state. As of the latest fiscal year end, which was March 31st, we had committed over $1.3 billion to clean energy and sustainable infrastructure, including energy efficiency projects across the state. So operating at this scale, we've got the leverage and frankly the responsibility to move the needle significantly on benefits to disadvantaged communities. So in our expanded investment approach, we are now weighing as a key investment goal when we evaluate all incoming proposals, we're weighing that beneficial impact to disadvantaged communities and their residents. We've long been focused, among other things, on driving greater liquidity in New York State's community solar market. So I'll give you an example. We've seen, frankly, a lot of really significant increase in private sector investors actively engaging in this segment of the market since we did our first transaction in 2017. As such, we're kind of de-emphasizing plain vanilla community solar in our portfolio now, and instead we are going to begin turning our focus to CDG projects that stimulate greater energy justice by requiring our counterparties to subscribe LMI subscribers, to these community solar projects. So what we're doing is we are stimulating the right kind of environmental justice investment in the state by, wielding quite a large capital base that we can put to work. And then lastly, Jigger mentioned that getting money out the door is what constitutes success. And we feel the same way. So we're not only focused on committing capital, but we're also focused on deploying it, because sometimes we can make a capital commitment, but a project doesn't go forward. And so that capital never gets drawn. And so we are also really thinking hard about, particularly with respect to these disadvantaged communities, making some commitments to capital that's going to be deployed, not only committed.
No, great, thank you. I'm going to turn to Jahi now. We've just been talking about New York State's 40% goal requirement for disadvantaged communities. Can you talk, Jahi, a little bit more about the administration's Justice 40 initiative, which also aims for 40% of the benefits, in this case, federal clean energy investments to go to underserved communities?
Yeah, absolutely. The Justice 40 initiative comes out of the president's deep commitment, administration's deep commitment to making sure that as we build this clean energy economy that we want by 2050, that the benefits of that economy accrue to not just the incumbents, or not just to those who are kind of in the current status quo structure, the places where those benefits typically accrue. So, if there's going to be millions of jobs created, well, we want to make sure that those jobs, flow to the right communities. If they're going to be investment dollars flowing to places, we want to make. So, the idea behind Justice 40 is that the federal government can be intentional and thoughtful about the way that it structures its programs so that there are equitable outcomes. And there's a really interesting process that's happening in the federal government now to think through exactly the mechanics of that. As you know, the federal government has dozens of programs that touch on the areas covered by Justice 40. And so, what are the current channels or flows of resources? And then what are the ways within, applicable law and, within, standards of prudence that we can actually make sure that those programs deliver for communities who we all know need this investment. And so I expect you'll see in the near future here a lot more on exactly how different programs are going to act on this effort. But it's really powerful to have had that kind of in the first week of the administration, that mark in the sand to say this is a priority, and we're actually going to try and move this big ship to meet these goals. So yeah, that's the kind of backdrop, and I'm really excited to see that work roll out over the next couple of months here.
No, we think it's great. We need to pay attention to all American families, not just those who might be able to afford a luxury electric car, but how do we reach everybody, particularly those who most need it? Kim, I'm going to ask you to elaborate a little bit more about the New York Green Bank, which is, as I understand it, a bit different from a lot of other green banks. You don't so much lend to consumers, but you're at more of a wholesale level. Could you say a little bit more about how you work and why you decided to go this route?
Sure. So we hold a big purse. So we were capitalized initially with $1 billion of New York State ratepayer capital. And when you have that much capital that you have to put to work, you end up developing strategies that really rely on wholesale capital commitment and capital deployment. So we are the largest green banking entity. As I mentioned, we've done over $1.3 billion of total investments to date. And for those of you who are wondering how that strange math works, we've been around for about 5 years, or we've been around a little longer, but we've been transacting for 5 years. And some of our loans have been repaid and recycled. So we've done $1.3 billion with $1 billion of ratepayer capital. And our median transaction size is somewhere in the order of $20 to $50 million. And so, our approach in all of our investments is to deploy capital on a wholesale basis, as you mentioned. And rather than provide retail financing to individual consumers, we're really providing structured financial products to developers, market participants, and then specific large-scale projects that create ripples across the market. So on the one hand, and I'll tie this back to the disadvantaged communities investment strategy, on the one hand, this means that we can really have impact at scale. We make the most of every ratepayer dollar. We're, really trying to affect lasting change across financing markets. And our investments are kind of setting the stage for follow-on private sector activity with, compounding benefits. But on the other hand, it also means that we're a step or sometimes multiple steps removed from the actual beneficiaries of the projects that our investments support. So having visibility, not just at the borrower level, but further downstream where we can understand the ultimate direct and tangible outcomes of our investments on these communities and the people in them is critical. And this is really why the strategy that we've been working on for the last year is starting with a strong focus on investment into affordable housing, because improvements to this building typology, this building stock, really will have a very clear relationship to the well-being of historically underserved or underinvested or marginalized New York State residents.
Okay.
Did that answer the question?
Yes, it did. Thank you. Let's see. I'm going to go back to Jahi. Jahi, one of the first times I met you in your new job, you were talking a lot about the administration's plans for clean energy investment in communities that have been or will be hit hard as a result of coal and other fossil fuel power plant closures. Can you say a little bit more about that work?
Yeah, and Steve, if you don't mind, I want to go back actually to the prior question as well, because I forgot to make two other important points there.
Please.
I just wanted to note that the Justice 40 work is not happening in a vacuum. This isn't like hey, let's figure this out. And Justice 40 is a part of a multi-pronged approach to making sure we embed environmental justice and equitable investment in policy. So I think two other points that are relevant there. One is the first time we've had a White House level environmental justice advisory council. And so this is a group of environmental justice leaders across the country who come together to advise the White House and agency leadership on environmental justice issues and issues of equitable investment. And so the voices of these, as Kim pointed to, the folks in disadvantaged communities, beneficiaries of this and of our programs and are in the room. And that's one key element of this strategy, including of the Justice 40 strategy. I think the second important piece here is that there's also now a White House Environmental Justice Interagency Council. So there's now a cabinet secretary level convening space in the White House where the folks who run the different agencies and these different programs come together to figure out how they, coordinate their programs, share the same values, meet the same objectives through their deployments. And so I think it's really important to put the Justice 40 within the context of the broader work, because otherwise it feels like it's this isolated thing. But to your question about energy communities, that's another area of really interesting work that overlaps deeply with the idea of serving disadvantaged communities. So the Interagency Working Group on Coal and Power Plant Communities was started again at the beginning of the administration with the idea that we need to be really thoughtful about how hard-hit coal and power plant communities, how they receive the resources and investments they need to see economic revitalization, to see new jobs come online, to support workers, energy workers who powered the last industrial revolution, and who are now seeing the downside of the changes in energy markets. And so the first step of that group was over the first 60 days of the administration. The group kind of inventoried all the existing authorities in the federal government that could be where resources could be, kind of pointed towards these communities, and did a series of stakeholder engagement sessions to try and understand what kind of resource needs in these communities look like, and published an initial report that outlines about $38 billion worth of investments that are possible through existing authorities, through like this year budget authority, that could support these communities, and then charts a path forward for that interagency work group to help deploy that capital that's in the American Jobs Plan, and resources, and other pots of resources to serve these communities. The Interagency Working Group is really supposed to be a convening place. It's supposed to be a place to help pull together agencies that are looking at these problems, like the Appalachian Regional Commission or Department of Energy, to think about how they can work together, and also a space for implementation to really try and target and think with some of the really talented regional economic development issues that are happening across the country, to make sure that they have access to the federal resource they need to be successful. It's a really interesting, complex, but rich area, and something that I know the president and vice president care deeply about. And so I as well expect you'll see a lot more of that over the coming months as that group begins to implement on its initial report and work plan.
No, thank you. Yeah, that's an important part of making sure everybody gets served and no one gets left behind. Appreciate it. Kim, I'm going to ask you one last question, then we'll turn to a few audience questions. But Kim, could you say a little bit more about the New York Green Bank's recent announcement of an expanded investment approach that will focus on projects that prioritize energy efficiency and electrification in housing found within disadvantaged communities across New York State?
You bet. So we're really excited about this affordable housing initiative. As a engineer by training and a former energy efficiency nerd, like this is the kind of stuff that really excites me personally. And as I mentioned earlier, we've really spent the better part of the last year considering how to deploy more capital into these underinvested communities. And, as many of us know, the building stock in New York State is huge and a considerable source of greenhouse gas emissions. Affordable housing is no exception. But the nuance of affordable housing, it's a low margin business with a very complicated capital stack and relationship with housing finance agencies that have historically had to prioritize housing units produced, roofs over heads, over aggressive energy performance. And so what we wanted to do was make sure that we had a pathway for affordable housing to access New York Green Bank's capital that was tailored very specifically for the multifamily affordable housing sector, given these unique considerations and unique capital needs, and that really couldn't be addressed with the same investment approach we take elsewhere. So we just actually issued our RFP for financing arrangements for high performance affordable housing. And it's a purpose-built proposal and evaluation pathway for affordable housing electrification and electrification readiness projects. And so we are offering a number of different loan types, including electrification and energy efficiency improvement loans. And these are really mid-cycle opportunities. And then more at the time of refinancing or acquisition, we are offering pre-development loans that are flexible capital to support very cost-intensive sort of repair, design, planning, and analysis required prior to construction, construction and construction to perm loans, and also permanent debt, which would be, competitively priced gap financing, underwritten to higher energy savings than is typical of other permanent lenders. So just picking up on one theme mentioned by Jigger, this idea of providing liquidity solutions to entities that can't get attention from commercial debt providers because of a lack of data. We are really entering the market to stimulate aggressive energy performance, underwritten to higher levels of savings than other commercial capital is willing to underwrite to. And so effectively, we're trying to demonstrate to public and private sources of capital the feasibility of underwriting to higher expected savings in affordable housing. And what this industry is missing is a fact base. How do the projected energy savings of electrified, deeply efficient multifamily buildings line up with reality? And so we are trying to hit, basically this sweet spot where the private market doesn't get involved until there's at scale, until there's strong precedents for success and a body of data that underlies it. And we basically come in and lean in early to commit the capital that paves the way and builds confidence for other investors. So we're super excited about this affordable housing initiative and in all of its many variants. And we made a $150 million commitment publicly last July, and now we're beginning to try to move projects through it. And we won't stop at 150, but we're going to do at least $150 million.
Okay, great. Let me ask two follow-up questions from two different people, and we're wrapping up now, so just looking for brief answers. The first part is your investment in affordable housing primarily for rental developments or owner-occupied, or a mix between the two. And the second is how does the New York Green Bank support project origination in underserved communities to bring projects to the stage where they can be financed?
Sure. So for answer the first question is we'll take all comers, but it's multifamily housing. These are larger projects. And so, for example, Mitchell-Lama co-ops could be of interest. I think when you have a sole decision maker in a rental building, that's going to be a lot easier than having to get a co-op board or a condo board to approve a project. But we'll do all ownership structures. And then in terms of origination, we've actually started to develop some pretty innovative channel partnerships. So we can't put capital to work at the speed and scale we're targeting without really good partnerships with organizations that have relationships with the ultimate borrowers. And so we did a $25 million transaction with Inclusive Prosperity Capital, where we call underwriting the underwriters, and they are deploying our capital on our behalf. So earlier this spring, we funded Block Power through that facility to do heat pumps in houses of worship. So that's an example of the underwriting the underwriters. And then we also have origination partnerships with lending institutions that are at other parts of the life cycle. So we're working with a CDFI right now that does a lot in construction finance, but is looking for a source of permanent debt that stimulates really high efficiency projects. And so we are working together. That's in our pipeline, and we're hoping to close that transaction. But what that means is that they will be bringing projects to us for our capital and using the relationships that they have in the market throughout the state. And I could go on and on, but I know we're at time.
Okay, but at this point, we've been going for more than an hour in this session. Wanted to give people a break to refresh their beverages and meet other needs. So we will be taking a break now, and the conference will begin at 2:45. But thank you, Kim. Thank you, Jahi. We very much appreciate your participation and your remarks, and help get us off to a great start. So thank you, and see you at 2:45.
Thank you very much.